Our stories today come from West Africa, from Ghana, where the Ashanti people live. Long ago, the Ashanti came to Ghana from somewhere farther north. They cleared and planted the land and hunted wild game of the forest. Among the early Ashanti were fine craftsmen, wood carvers, and weavers. The Ashanti of the past and the village people of today build their dome-shaped houses in a circle, using slender poles covered with woven grass reeds. Boys and girls help thatch the little houses with sheaves of grass cut in short lengths. And at night, when the moon is high in the sky and all a day's work is done, the men, women, and children of all ages leave their round houses and go to an open space in the middle of the village. There, they gather around a cozy fire and call for the storyteller, the one who tells the stories the best. West Africa is rich in a number of different kinds of stories it's created. The folk tales of the Ashanti tribe are particularly noted for their humor, and it was the Ashanti who created the stories of Kwaku Ananse, the cunning spider. Ananse is one of the favorite West African characters. Sometimes he's a spider, and other times he appears as a man. He's at the same time both very wise and very foolish. Ananse loves to eat, but he hates to work. And this often gets him into trouble. And he usually has to use his cleverness to get himself out of it. In our first story, we'll learn why spiders have a thin, thin middle. And in the second story, we'll see what happens when Ananse tries to get a free meal from the turtle. So imagine yourself in West Africa on the Gulf of Guinea. The night is high, and the moon is high in the sky. It's a time for storytelling. So gather around and hear. Hear the storyteller's call. Come. Come. Come listen to the time when the spider was fat and had no fin. Come listen to the time when the turtle outsmarted Ananse. Come listen. Listen. Listen and learn. Early one morning, Ananse was walking through the forest when he noticed a very pleasant smell. He wrinkled his nose and sniffed the wind first. First this way, then that. Goodness me, it is food. He'd almost forgotten. Today was the festival of the harvest, and every village in the forest was preparing a feast. People were cooking yams and cassava and chicken with peanut-flavored sauce, and there would be fish and peppers and rice boiling in great pots. Ananse jumped for joy and smacked his lips. His eyes sparkled, and he smiled brightly as he thought of the good-tasting food. Now, Ananse had not done any work to deserve such a feast, so no one had invited him to come and eat. All he did was play in the sun and sleep. Ananse was right in the middle of a path between two villages, and each village was having a feast. How lucky for me, thought Ananse. But he didn't know which feast to go to, so he sat down to think about it. He thought for a long time. Finally, he decided, I shall go to both of them. Ananse was so pleased with himself that he did a little dance. Now, how could he know when the food was ready? He sat down to think some more. When he thought of a plan, he did another dance because he was so brilliant. With his plan in mind, Ananse did two things. First, he called his eldest son, Kuma. He took a long rope and tied one end around his middle and gave the other end to his son. Take this rope to the villages on the east, and when the food is ready, give the rope a hard pull, and then I'll know that it's time to come and eat, he said to Kuma. Then Ananse called his youngest son, Kwaku, and took another long rope, tied it around his middle just below the first one. Kwaku, he said. Now you take this rope to the village on the west, and when the food is cooked, pull very, very hard, and then I'll come and eat my fill. Well, you can imagine what happened. The people in both villages had dinner at the same time. Of course, both of Ananse's sons pulled on the ropes at the same time. The ropes got tighter and tighter, and poor greedy Ananse was caught right in the middle. He could neither go east or west. Kuma and Kwaku couldn't understand why their father didn't come, and both pulled harder and harder. The rope squeezed tighter and tighter and tighter, and his middle got thinner and thinner and thinner. Kuma and Kwaku waited until all the food was eaten. Then they came to look for their father. When they found him, he looked very different. His waistline was thinner, thinner than a needle. Ananse never grew fat again. From that time on, he would have a big body and a tiny waist in between. Many months later, when it was almost time for the sun to sink in its resting place, Turtle, tired and dusty from hours of wandering, came to Ananse's house in the middle of a clearing in the woods. Turtle was hungry, and the smell of freshly cooked fish and yams drew him to Ananse's door. Turtle knocked on the door. Ananse jerked open the door. And since it was the custom in his country to show hospitality to travelers, he smiled unhappily and invited Turtle to come in and share his dinner. As Turtle reached out his paw for some food, Ananse stopped him. In a shocked voice, he said, "Turtle, in my country it's bad manners to come to the table without washing. Please go to the stream and wash your dusty paws." Turtle obediently waddled down the hill and waded in the water. He washed his paws. He even washed his face. By the time he got back to Ananse's house, half the dinner was gone. Ananse was eating very fast. Turtle stretched out a paw to help himself to food. But again, Ananse stopped him. "Turtle," he said, "your paws are still dusty. Please go and wash them again." "But it's dust from the trail," Turtle tried to explain. But he knew he shouldn't argue if he wanted to have any dinner. So Turtle washed his paws in the stream again. On his way back to Ananse's house, Turtle walked in the grass by the trail, and he hurried because he was very hungry. But by the time the poor Turtle returned, Ananse had eaten all the dinner and said, "That was a good dinner.
"Well, thank you for your wonderful hospitality, Ananse. Someday you must visit me,"
said the angry Turtle as he left to go home. Some months later, Ananse visited the Turtle. After creepy crawling all day through tall grass stems, he found Turtle snoozing by the river.
"Well, well, well,"
exclaimed the Turtle.
"So you've come to share my dinner. Well, make yourself comfortable, Ananse, while I go below and prepare the food."
He dived into the river with a splash. Ananse was very hungry, so he paced the shoreline, waiting for Turtle to reappear. At last, Turtle's head popped above the water.
"Dinner is ready,"
he called to Ananse.
"Come on down."
Ananse dived headfirst into the water, sank a few inches, and then he floated to the surface. His spindly legs and tiny body prevented him from sinking. He flipped and flapped his puny arms and tried shallow dives and belly flops, but couldn't reach the bottom of the river. So the cunning spider schemed. He filled the pockets of his jacket with small round pebbles to make him heavier so he would sink to the bottom of the river. Again, he dived into the water. But this time, he went down, 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 and landed with a bump right at the dinner table. There before him was spread the most delicious meal he'd ever seen. There were oysters and clams and mussels and sliced eel and crabs. As a centerpiece, sprays of watercress rested against large pink shrimp. Ananse's eyes widened with pleasure at the sight of such a feast. Turtle, already seated at the table, swallowed a piece of eel and looked at Ananse and said,
Nancy, I must remind you that in my country it is bad manners to wear a jacket to the table, so could you please take it off?
So very slowly, Ananse removed his jacket. And very slowly, Ananse left the table. Without the weight of the pebbles to hold him down, he floated up, 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 straight up to the top of the water. Today, life among the Ashanti is as changing as life everywhere is changing. Life in the cities of West Africa is like city life anywhere. But the stories and the legends of long ago are still told and enjoyed. Today there are hundreds of stories about Ananse. Stories like how the world got wisdom, how Spider helped the fishermen, and how the spider got a bald head. Ananse stories are told in Africa, in the West Indies, and in South Central America. Of course, in the United States. You may hear them called Ananse stories or stories of Aunt Nancy or Sister Nancy, but they're all stories about an adventurous spider. So go. Read. Read and share the tales of Ananse.
The preceding program was funded in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.